Testing the microphone. Microphone tested. Hey everyone, welcome to today's video. My name's Dan, I'm one of the marketing people here at Slug Disco. And in this video, I will be sitting down with Liam, one of the core developers of Empires in Undergrowth, to talk about all things AI. And not just the AI that has been in the game previously, but the AI that's come in with the Fire Ant update and the 1.0 update, and these changes will eventually make their way into free play as well. As an aside, if I look slightly bored during this, I wasn't. I was just very hyped on coffee and I was trying as hard as I could to concentrate on what Liam was saying. And without further ado, let's just jump straight into it. Yeah, so do you want to just introduce yourself and kind of your role on the project, just so we can introduce you to the community if they don't know, if they're kind of new to the community?
Yeah, I'm Liam, one of the core developers that's been working on Empires of the Undergrowth since the start. I don't really have a very specific role. At the moment, I'm working on the colony AI, which I've done a few times in the past, so that's what I'll be talking about today. I worked on lots of things to do with movement, how the creatures collide with each other, how they find their way around the nest, how they find their way around the world. I've worked on the music, the narration systems in the game, little bits of everything, really.
Yeah, the OST that everyone loves on our YouTube channel, that's all you, isn't it?
Yeah. Although I have a lot of, I copy a lot of things, not directly, but I have a lot of influences, let's say.
Yeah, we'll cover that in a future video. But yeah, like you said, today's about AI, isn't it?
So I've been working on AI for the next expansion, which is the Fire Ant update. What's been going on is we've got enemy colonies on the map. So if you're not sort of really familiar with the campaign, you'll play different missions as an ant colony, and there may or may not be an enemy colony depending on the scenario that's been set up. And in the past, we had less. I think the first early access release of the game didn't have a real enemy ant colony in it. And we've moved more and more towards having enemy ant colonies because that's what people seem to want. It's fun having the ants fight different creatures, but really what everybody wants to see is ant colonies fighting ant colonies. So for that, we need an AI for the enemy colony so that you can play against them. And there's different ways of doing that. It's not like having an AI for a lot of time when people talk about AI in games, they're talking about a single AI for an enemy. We call them an enemy agent. So some character that you're playing against. So they might be trying to shoot you, and they might be dodging and ducking and jumping and shooting, and they might have a path that they walk. But this sort of AI is like a computer that controls the whole colony. So they decide what to build, where to move all of their ants, how to manage their resources, how to defend themselves, how to react to pressure. And that's really quite a complicated problem. There are a lot of tricks that you can use, which I mean, we've used more tricks in the past, but the players always notice. So people say it's cheating, or it either cheats or it's easy to defeat, and it's a really difficult problem to work on. And of course, being a small team, you got to keep you've got to stay within a certain scope. You can't just go off and say, right, I'm going to spend 2 years developing my perfect ant colony AI.
Yeah,
really
I mean,
time for it.
because Unreal Engine does come with built-in tools to do that, but obviously it was set up for kind of Unreal Tournament. It was set up for kind of 6 players versus 6 other players or bots to kind of walk around a small environment and shoot each other.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
kind of what the core. So it isn't just as simple as you can script it really quickly because, like I said, it's not just the different colonies; it's the different ants, and there's lots of ants on screen at one
Well,
time as
yes.
well.
So I mean, there we are. So I can actually have a look at that sort of AI. So this is the creature behavior tree, and this would be more familiar to someone that's, I mean, maybe not this shape, but someone that's used Unreal before or behavior trees before, because you can use these in other game engines. And this is like the brain of an ant or a creature. And it's got lots of different sort of subtrees. It'll have some state, whether it's climbing, or it's trying to make a bridge, or it's carrying food, uh, it's attacking the enemy, and then if it's doing one of those things, it'll go into another behavior tree, and these are all the different stages of making a bridge. So bridges are based on this thing called the cart system. So fire ants can make bridges. This is a new system that's for the upcoming expansion. And so there's several stages to making bridges, and then inside, you can keep going into these bits until you get to a task. These are the sort of the low level items where it's actually got the logic, and this is a bit more like code. But yeah, this is what you'd be familiar with in an FPS to be, an enemy, and these would be, whether he's retreating or hiding or shooting at you, or bandaging himself, and he'd only be doing one thing at a time. The AI that controls the whole colony, it doesn't really. I mean, I'm sure you can set it up like this, like in a behavior tree, but I haven't found it particularly helpful to have this sort of layout for an AI colony. I tried a couple of times, but it's quite different the way we do things with the colony AI.
You said this is how it used to be, and you've moved away from this kind of blackboard system now.
All right. So I mean, we tried this once, but I'll talk a bit about the history, because I do like the sound of my own voice. When the game first came out in December 2017, we had 4 proper campaign levels. We had we call them Formicarium levels and campaign missions. We had these 4 campaign missions. They were the central feature of the first early access version. And we've got them in here, stage 1 and stage 2 in these folders. Stage 1 was just levels underground. There was no enemy colony. Stage 2 has 2 missions. Rising Tide, which also, it has overground, but it doesn't have an enemy colony. And then Queen of the Hill, which does have 2 enemy colonies that you're competing against, but you're not directly fighting them. And we had a debate early on. It was actually an ongoing debate, whether we should bother making full enemy colonies, especially for this particular level, Queen of the Hill, before the game came out, because the whole enemy colony, I'll show you when this loads.
Because was free play not free play wasn't in at this point, was it?
No, free play wasn't part of the game. This campaign level was the only level you could play with enemy colonies. So here's the player entrance and exit. So in Empires of the Undergrowth, you have an underground nest and there's an overground area to explore, but you only have one passage between outside and the undergrowth. And overground, it looks like this, these 3 holes. Underground, they're actually in the same sort of area. They're over here, so this is the player's underground. Over here, there's 2 enemy colonies. Now, in this level, you can't send your ants to invade the enemy colony. You can't go into their nest. These are just places where the enemy ants come out of, and they do things in the day. And so we had this debate over what we call the spawning hole idea, where if you can't go in, why bother simulating a proper underground? Because the player can't appreciate it. There might be all chambers, and the queen might be laying eggs, and things are being passed around properly, like all the functionality is there underground, but you can't see it. All the player sees is ants coming out of a hole. And of course, we can just generate those. We can say, generate 10 ants.
Yeah.
Now, I wanted to go with the spawning hole. John was the main driving force behind having a real colony. Now, for the first release, for this first early access version, the underground colonies, which did make it in, are completely unnecessary because you can't go in. So I still maintain that we would have been fine with spawning holes. However, doing this did pave the way for a lot of the stuff that came later. And I think if we'd have gone with spawning holes here, maybe it would have influenced the game to the point where we never had an enemy colony that you could enter. So,
I guess that's interesting. So
yeah,
the enemy colonies, they are there, they're doing stuff
yeah,
underground, but the player will never see that. You can't.
exactly. So you can see them here. There's a black ant colony here. It's got its whole base built. It's got food chambers, a queen. It's got some ants to start with, and it's got this is the wood ant colony. Now, I talked about AI before, like the ant itself, the creature has a behavior tree. That's a type of AI. There's colony control, which is the like a computer player that's as if they're a human, you putting markers around and deciding what to do. But there's other, intermediate pieces of AI as well, because if you play Empires: The Undergrowth, you'll notice you don't tell your ants directly where to go. You don't select ant A, go to point B. You put a marker down, the ants make their own way there. And the way eggs move around the nest and the way food is managed. So, for example, you put a job down to dig a tile. If I fire this up, you press here, and the ants go to it and dig. There's actually an AI piece called the job manager that tells the ants to do what job and in what order, and what's more important, whether digging's more important, building's more important, or taking eggs to tiles is more important. And this is all handled separately as well. So it's another type of AI that's going on, and these two colonies have it. So I was part of once the nest is built, a lot of automation was already built in anyway because the player has it, and all we needed was really an AI system for placing the markers.
Yeah.
Now, what ended up happening was in the day, markers go down here, and the enemies come out and harvest some food that gets washed up on the beach, and they take the food home, and with the food they can hatch more ants, and their colony does work as intended like that, but they also launch attacks against the player. And over the course of the mission, the attacks get bigger and bigger and bigger. And then for that to be reliable, for the attacks to become reliably bigger each time, you can't just have the AI place a marker on the player's nest and say, okay, send the army group there now. Because some really good player might have played the game in a bit of an unorthodox way and decided to attack the two enemy colonies relentlessly for the first half of the game and starve them of resources, and then in the second half of the game the narrator's going, and now the giant black ant attack is coming up the hill,
Yeah.
and nothing's coming out at all. So it cheats heavily in here. If I have a look at the AI, this is the level AI, so this is another type of AI. So this is the level blueprint. It's not really an AI, but it's kind of a manager. Level manager decides what's going to happen over the course of the day, and there's not really much logic here. It's mostly timed, and a lot of the stuff that can change is based on difficulty. But there will be, for example, here a wood ant attack, and these are all multipliers based on what day it is and what difficulty setting you're on. And then if you come over here, we'll see that it spawns a targeted colony swarm. This is a function that just it generates a load of ants underground in the enemy nest and sends them towards your queen to attack. So it's completely artificial.
Yeah, so it's heavily scripted, not like dynamic.
Yeah, there is. I mean, I don't think I did this. I don't think I had anything to do with. This looks like something that I had my hands on doing scaling, but this looks like something John put in, and I like this here. I've just found this earlier today. Spend player resources. So this will be an attempt to sort of make the spawned enemies actually seem like they were built by the enemy player. So it's going to cost them 300 resources to send these things out. But I'm guessing this return pin probably tells it whether or not it managed to spend the resources, and you can see that whether or not it's true, it's still going to spawn them anyway. So it might have a little bit of an effect. It might make less of them go out in the day to get fish or something like that.
Have you ever thought about going back and reworking some of the earlier levels, like do a final pass for maybe 1.0 to make it so players can go in, or would that just ruin kind of obviously the narration of the level?
The problem is, there's narration, so it's all heavily scripted. It's doable, but it's not really. We'd be making a whole other level. We'd have to have a level design meeting and decide what the implications of the player being able to enter the enemy nest was, and what happened if the players killed them early. It'd probably be fine. We'd just have to add some extra narration, extra logic. It'd be quite a bit of work. May as well just make a new level,
like an extra level, like the Redux version of the Rising Tide or Queen of the Hill. Okay, yeah, that's quite interesting.
So the game came out, and I decided that I had loads of time to then work on the perfect AI, the masterpiece AI. And I think I was at it for 3 or 4 months before I abandoned it. It wasn't all wasted, but I bit off more than I could chew. So I started making this thing called the Hivebop, and it did have a little behavior tree, but this is it. It's just a loop. And this isn't very much set up, but most of this is a set of C++ functions. So there were four main pieces. There was Hivebop construction, Hivebop missions, Hivebop nest management. I don't know, there were a bunch of different things, and the idea behind this AI was that the enemy AI was actually supposed to think, what do I want to do? And it was going to create. I wanted to think like a player would think. So I might think, you know what, I'm going to get those resources in the right, and then when they're finished, I'll move over to the left, and I'll defend that line as much as possible. But maybe if it gets too bad, I'll reconsider. So I'd have a plan like that, and I wanted the AI to think like that. So I had this thing called the mission system, and it was full of weights based on whether they wanted to change their mind or not about certain decisions, and it was expanding into this huge horrible mess. And like I say, I abandoned it, but I did save some of the functions, and I've gone back into it today for the first time in years. There's a level.
Is this the kind of like hive mind test level?
Yeah. The bot training grounds. I just happened to open this up, and I think what this is. This looks like the underground to the demo level. So actually, this is a bit later. So I think this setup is actually, it might have been a copy of what I was doing originally, which might explain why none of it works. And then this was going to be some sort of fighting place. Look at this. Is just fun. You can still see the exit shape used to be different.
Into the three kind of hexagons. It was.
Yeah. So there's a mess there at the moment. And the only thing that ever sort of got fully sort of tested and finished was the AI's ability to build its nest underground. And there was a YouTube video of this working. I don't think it's not the same map. So this was definitely a copy with the stuff added in later. But you can see in this little video from 2018, it shows the progress of the AI building its own underground.
Okay.
And so what it would do is it would make hex chambers, and this is just set to do like random sizes, but it'd make a size based on its perceived need. And then it's also designed so that there are walkways, there are paths, but the paths can't go through a hex because there's a movement penalty for ants in Empires of the Undergrowth Underground if your ants are walking over nest chamber, which is like your buildings. So inside these hexes, they slow down. So you actually, what you want to do is you want to design your nest with chambers and corridors, and the ants will find their way through the corridors and they'll move around much faster. So I was trying to get the AI to do this. It makes some mistakes here. This is open the way through. You'll be thinking about going around this way, but I think like the Pathfinder would shortcut the ants through here. But for that, so they're really quite long paths, but they do work. Now I tried to fire this up. This is an example of why, when you say, oh, let's go back to it and just do it up a bit, like after so many things have changed, you can't expect something to work. So I just fired this up and it wasn't working at all, but I plugged a few things back in just to see if it worked. And you can see the AI making a total pig's ear of its nest. Like it has I don't know what its objective is. It's doing something. These rooms are not hexagonal. This is to do with a hexagon grid offset. I've seen this before. I have no idea why it should be happening. But you can see it's the same system. It's just not working.
It's just a broken version.
Yeah. So it is there in the game somewhere. The need to make the levels for the Leafcutter update was, important as well. And I realized, if I wanted to make this AI work, I could be working on it for a year or more, and still, debugging it will be a nightmare. And I made the very painful decision to stop. I salvaged a lot of the functions, a lot of the hexagon-based stuff, which was really useful for underground scanning and things like that, and moved on to making the AI for the first of the 2 Leafcutter missions.
Which I just beat. Finally.
Oh, yeah, you did. You beat 3-1.
Yeah, finally.
Congratulations.
The opposing colony to the north has pulled back some of its harvesters.
Goodness.
Time to regroup. The ants have subdued their rivals and
Get myself a pat on the back for that one.
As the competition withers, they will extend their territory in all directions, firmly establishing their agricultural empire.
I'm going to be honest, I could not have bared to lose that again live on stream.
Okay, so with this mission, this is the first of the Leafcutter missions, and the idea is that you've got to harvest more leaves than the enemy. Your colony is here, and the enemy one is here. And all the juicy leaves are near the enemy, and you've got to try and harvest more than them. So it's who can get the most leaves, sort of that. I don't know when the decision came about, because this could have been a spawning hole as well, but it was agreed that the player would be able to enter the enemy nest, and so it had to be a proper AI. Unfortunately, it ended up cheating anyway, which was a shame. But it's very hard to make an AI that doesn't cheat that can beat a player on extremely hard mode. Very, very difficult. So even though the level's set up in their favor a bit, it's going to have to cheat because there's going to be exploits that I haven't thought of. I think there are some even when you play this. So it was a much more complicated. The enemy had to be able to manage itself. It wasn't going to spawn ants like that one did in Queen of the Hill. Now, funnily enough, in the end, it did spawn ants. You'll see this is the enemy colony, how it looks to start with, and you'll see this horrific embarrassment that I had to put in last minute, which was it's a spawning hole and it can spawn mages, and it doesn't spawn them very often. It's only when you attack. If the player attacks the colony and actually enters, it was very difficult to get the enemy AI to respond fast enough to stop you from killing the queen like a player might be able to, because it can't really see you coming, and we were, I think we were weeks away from release when we were testing, and it was found to be so easy to beat the enemy this way. So this just generates major ants that come and attack if the player invades the AI nest. But other than that, it doesn't spawn anything. Everything else is an AI. So there's
Okay,
two
so
parts to this.
I thought the ant nest, I thought the enemy ant nest was kind of going to be a pre-built thing. So does it build it as the level progresses?
It is. So this is like what this is. This is the sequence bot. It's called.
The terrifying graphic.
Yeah, it is a bit scary. So all these graphics, the bot graphics, are based on open clip art. Each time I do one, I make one from open clip art. You'll see the conductor will be somewhere. Where is he? He's the conductor Mark II. He's been awake for a long time with scary teeth. Let me head back over here. So this is like a plan for the nest. So this is the underground of the enemy colony. This can all be set up front. Now it's a bit fiddly. You click on the bot that you want, and then click on work on pre-dug tiles and the sequence rooms. Okay, so these are all the rooms. Let me see if I make this room size 2. It's this one over here.
Yeah, so it changes it.
So what happens at the beginning of the level is all the paths get dug out, right? So the ants don't dig their own paths. That just gets wiped out at the beginning. The reason it's not already dug out here is because you can actually have different bots with different building plans. So the building plans actually are mostly the same, but the idea was that maybe the easy bot would have a different layout than the hard bot, and that way you, instead of digging it into the map and making separate maps, you just have this plan and it digs it out at the beginning of the level when it starts to play.
Okay.
These rooms aren't pre-dug out though, so the ants will be told to do that. So yeah, the build icon's just gone down, so they've been told to upgrade this tile. So the way the building bot thinks is it's got this blueprint. All the rooms are pre-designed, and all it'll try and do is it'll try and maintain a bank. So the bank is controlled by some setting on the level, and it will try and maintain a bank that's like 2 times the cost to respawn the whole colony at that time. So if the colony is really big, it'll keep a much bigger bank, and this is so that it can have a big fight and it can still respawn everybody. And once it's got surplus from its bank, it'll try and build or upgrade tiles. So this will go on, it'll develop, and eventually it'll end up looking like this. How we had it set up. And you can prioritize different things, like you can say one room is going to be built before the other, or one group's rooms are going to be built first, etc. So some basic control there, and that's how it builds itself up. Separate to that is its AI, and this is on the level. Right, so this is the sort of the AI of what the enemy's thinking. Actually, if I press play, it ticks every few seconds. So you can see the line of where it's going. It's like a lightning strike through here. So what it's doing is it's got 2 harvesting groups, sending them to collect leaves, and then it's got 2 sort of defensive fighting groups, and it'll send them to defend. And this was based a little bit on what happens in a leafcutter colony in nature. They're not going to send mages out of the nest unless there's a problem to be dealt with, and they stay inside the nest. The AI is going to come out, and it's got 2 harvesting groups. It's going to come out, harvest leaves, and it's not going to do anything else until it's in some sort of danger. So if it comes across an enemy creature, it might start defending itself, sending out its mages, or if the player harasses it. And what it does is, if you harass like one of the enemy harvesting points, they'll retreat, and then they'll come back again with the mages as well, right? With in a sort of like escort fashion, the mages will come with the harvesters, and there'll be a big sort of strike back. So one of the ways to play, or how I sort of perceived it, was that you would harass the enemy, send them back home to slow them down, but you'd leave and harvest somewhere else before the mages returned, maybe attack them somewhere else just to keep them bouncing around. Now, that worked out quite well for this level. It's really, if you think about it, it's an AI based around the habits of the Leafcutter ant, which, you know, the level was designed around, and it fits the, you know, the level design. You know, you the harvester's coming out, you attack, there's a scuffle, and the defenders come. But a player would never do that. A player would have its defending group out harvesting leaves, or like guarding its ants, striking against the player, doing all sorts of stuff. It just doesn't make sense to play like that. So it's not really an AI for to be used in other situations.
So it's not, in this case, it's not emulating a player, it's emulating an actual colony.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's more like a simulation of an ant colony in a basic way, and you're playing against that rather than playing against someone that's playing competitively against you. Now the next thing that happened, so you know, this worked fairly well, apart from that spawning hole, that I underground, that little cavern that I talked about earlier.
Yeah.
This worked fairly well, but it wasn't immediately transferable to another level or to another scenario. And I always sort of had this idea that, you know, the AI was going to need another upgrade, because I can't do this, you know, this mess. And this isn't the end of the mess. There's functions within functions here, with all sorts of stuff going on. So I couldn't set this up, you know, feasibly for every level. All AIs would work differently. Nothing would be reusable. It'd be a whole mess. But I never got round to redoing an AI. I always had something else on my plate, working on movement a lot. We were doing a lot of optimization in late 2019 and 2020. So there wasn't really chance to upgrade the AI. And John got impatient, working on his free play mode, and everyone's asking, when are the enemy colonies coming into free play? When are the enemy colonies coming into free play? You have to understand that free play is like John's baby. It was his idea, and he went off and created it himself, which is brilliant. But it also suffers from not having me and Matt work on it as much as, you know, the campaign is like all three of us working together, and free play is John taking his best features out of that. So he was stuck without an AI for a while, and because I wasn't doing anything on that front, he took it upon himself to grab this and put it into an object called, what it's called. I mean, he was telling me that he was doing it on the chat, and I was just petrified, and it was horrible, because I didn't have time or the sort of the will to get involved, and it just sounded like a terrible idea to me. But he managed to do it, as crazy as I think it is. So you can see the similarities here, the same sort of, you know, there'll be differences. I'll have had to debug a lot of this because it won't have made sense. But this version is not level specific, so he can drop this into free play.
Okay.
I think it has some other functions and some extra things that it does now, but it's still based around that the enemy is, you know, a simulated Leafcutter colony. So it's I still think of this as a placeholder AI in free play until the final AI is sorted. But that's where this is the pinnacle of AI in the game at the moment. The public version.
A lot of spaghetti code.
Yeah, literally spaghetti code. Well, that's what a blueprint is, isn't it? Some lovely spaghetti over here. This is narration stuff. I hope that's not in the. He's got rid of that. Okay, so where we are now then. To go to that, some secret stuff. I'm working on AI again at the moment, and this is hopefully the last time I'll work on AI for Empires of the Undergrowth. Maybe we'll do something different for the next project we work on. So this is the testing arena for the latest AI, and this AI is going to do all of the missions now until the game's released, and free play as well. Once I've finished it, I'll pass it over to John. I'm sure he'll make a lot of changes and integrate it into free play. But this works on an entirely new system. The underground part is very similar to the sequence bot that we looked at before. There's some new icons now. Where are we over here? Okay, so this is.
That's nice and creepy.
This is the mod bot. I've called it the mod bot. I don't know if that's the modifiable bot or the modular bot. I couldn't make my mind up, so it's just the mod bot. And the idea here is there's this central unit called the mod bot, and you see which is indicated by having all these brains going into the brain. And what you do is you add modbot processes to it in a list, which are here on the side. So at the moment, this has a defense process and a harvesting process, but I can get rid of these. Just empty this array, and I can just put this one in. This is the, what's it called? The simple command process. You see, he's a bit simple. He's got a very small brain. It doesn't really do much. And I'm just going to connect that one to the modbot. So this is just going to run these processes in order, one after another. And the idea is that you can make your own process. You can use the ones that are already available, and you can make your own AI out of a group of processes. So you might want an AI that just does that just harasses the enemy for the first 10 minutes of the game, and then throws everything they've got at the enemy, and you'd add a harassment process and an attacking process, and then you'd make the attacking process dormant for 10 minutes and then have it take over. Or you'd throw in a harvesting process or whatever else you want into this list. So if I look at this one, I don't remember what this does. It's just got, right, you can just send the groups out to different places, and this is going to send I think, where's actor 3? It's just over there. Okay, so it's this colony, and I think if I start this up, it doesn't crash. A marker should appear over here. Yeah, they're coming out. There we go. So the marker's there. Okay, so that's where. Yeah, so it's a very simple process. It's just put a marker down. But now what I can do is I can go back over to here, and I can get rid of this because it's not that useful to me. And I'm going to put in a defensive process. Okay, so we can have a look at this in more detail if I just click edit the blueprint. You see some more spaghetti here. So this is looking a little bit similar to this, the heart of the old 3.1 AI.
Yeah.
But it's just a piece of it that's modular that can slot in. So the idea, all this bot does, is it keeps an eye on the nest entrance, nearby the nest entrance, and decides whether or not there's a danger, and it needs to reroute defenders to deal with that danger. So what I can do is I can give this player a big resource injection and give it that defensive process. Now it'll be far more defensive if I invade their nest, but I don't think that's active at the moment. Okay, so now you can see it's got this scan that's going on already. So this is one of the new features. You won't be able to see this when you're playing.
Yeah, in game, this is all like debug stuff.
Yeah, but you'll notice that it's not an instant scan. It's doing lots of little squares one after the other. And the idea here is that scanning is actually quite expensive, and giving the AI a view of the whole map, a snapshot of that once every frame, is extremely expensive. And in a lot of games, the way that you sort of reduce the load on the processor is you stagger different things. But even if you had it scan every 5 seconds, all that would do is have a huge frame drop. It would lag. It would stutter every 5 seconds doing this massive scan. So instead, what this does is it scans one block every frame, and then when it's finished, it then has a tally of everything that was there. The disadvantage is it's not instant, and something might have moved by the time the AI makes a decision about this.
It's interesting that the scan are squares, but the world's made up of hexes. Is it so? It's not on a hex by hex basis.
No, it's not. I think it was something we wanted to do. We wanted to have a record of what every ant that was on every hex, and then scanning would be incredibly simple. And that was something that we cut short from our overhaul of the world. Almost made it in, but it was going to be another couple months of work to set that up, and it would have been a nice performance boost as well. And there's still scope for doing that, but for now, this is just an Unreal function. So this is based on a PhysX function that just does a scan in a square.
Okay.
And then we spread those out. So you'll see that we didn't attack the enemy. We just went to outside their nest, and they found us.
Just immediately
and came
out
and dealt with the situation. Now I don't think they'll bother going back in until there's something else for them to do, so they'll just stay there now. So that's an example of the defensive procedure. I can connect something a bit more complicated now. I will add the harvesting process, and I'll swap these around to make the harvesting process a priority. Actually, no, defense should be a priority. I mean, you'll change the behavior based on which way around these are, because what it'll do is the AI will do these different steps in order, and if the defense process sends group 2 and group 3 to defend, and the harvesting process then runs and wants to send group 2 and group 3 to harvest, it won't be able to because they'll be locked out. Whereas if you do it the other way around, the harvesting groups will go off and the defensive process will just have to work with what's left behind, and that could be nothing. So I want the defensive process there first. So if we run this now, this harvesting process has a much bigger scan, and it scans for food. It's going to make its way out across the world and find these different sources of food.
Okay, so is that them finding the path now?
Yeah, there's okay, so this is another part of the AI as well. So they want to, before they just go out blindly to collect food, they need to know if it's safe. Now, like as a player, we'd have a look at the map and we'd say, okay, there's a beetle there, I'm not going near that, or the player's already harvesting that, I don't want to go to that. And we don't just look at the actual area. In 3.1, there is a version of this, but it just looks at where the ants are. And of course, you've got this whole, trail that you need to be considering. So what it does is it scans along the trail for anything that might be there. This is actually using circular scans that overlap a little bit. But there's two different colors. There's orange and brown. And this is a system that I put together that says if the scan if there's been a previous scan in that area recently, and by recently I think it's set to about 3 seconds, it will just use cache data from the previous scan. And that's another way of saving resources. It doesn't actually have to scan the same place each time. So you notice, it might be looking at these 2 different plants, and a lot of the path is the same, and so it's repeating the scan. You can see some superimposed orange and brown scan lines there. So it's only actually doing it once, and sharing the data between those 2. So the reason these green squares are coming up is because I gave this colony so much resources, like 5,000 resource injection, so it keeps using them up and dropping its food and then spending it, and then they spot something on the floor and pick it up. So
okay, so they're not just searching at the end point, they will obviously find resources on the ground between the colony and the end point.
Exactly. When a scan comes out, I mean, the scan doesn't always... It can stop early if it's found enough food, if it thinks it's found enough food, but it's heading out here, and it might see something that the ants dropped. Well, the ants will automatically pick stuff up on the way anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the harvesting process. If I attack, you might see. Let's see, all of this is still in development. This is the cutting edge right now. If I come over here, I want to come where they're not going to be. I wish there wasn't a food point here, but I'll come down here, and we've got some group data here. So there's the defensive process is designed to, it's set up at the moment to send groups marked army groups out to defend only if they can win. It won't bring harvest groups to defend unless it thinks it's absolutely necessary, and that's set at the moment to an attack underground. At the moment, what's army? Red and yellow. So red and yellow are set to harvest up here. But see, here's a yellow army group. It's been rerouted to deal with this problem here. So they should be coming to deal with my ants right now. I haven't actually tried both of these processes running at the moment, so I would hope that once my ants are gone, that yellow one returns to... Yeah, okay, so it's had enough, and it's gone back to harvest.
Okay, so and that's the kind of priority that you put in, isn't it? So once it is finished defend, if there's nothing to defend against, it'll go on to the next thing. So in a way, that is kind of like the kind of the almost like family tree looking thing at the start, where you've got the different blocks, but it's still modular in that way, but a lot more custom to kind of what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. So going forward now, I say we're almost finished. I'm almost ready to start putting this into the levels, because there's not that many more processes to do, and the ones that are left to do are fairly simple. I mean, the big difficulties are really designing these things like these scan functions and getting all of this working, checking that the cached scan is like really returning how many ants are on the floor, because there are so many problems that you can have, and it's not immediately clear that you've got a problem, because as long as the ants are going out and harvesting, it kind of looks like they're doing the right thing. It's not a matter of, oh, test if it runs, oh, it's crashed, I've made a mistake. You could run this for 10 minutes, reading all of the debug output here, and then go, oh, I didn't think it was supposed to do that. And then you've got a mystery.
You said obviously that's going so fast. Didn't you say that you'd record the debug log and then go through frame by frame just to you could actually read what was happening?
Yeah, what I do is I'll set the camera somewhere like here, so I can see the other colony as well, which isn't active at the moment. And shall we turn those on just to have them battle it out a bit? Hopefully that'll work. I'll just set this one up to just do its harvesting process. So this one might struggle a little bit. It's not as powerful as the black ant either. I'll give it I'll give it a load of extra resource injection as well, so it's rich. So what I'd do is I'd set the camera up here, and then just record the screen, and then rewatch it in slow motion and read all of this stuff, which should tell me what's going on. So these, you can see the color of the different text: Army Group 4, Army Group 3, Harvest Group 2. Those colors correspond to the colors of the markers that have been placed down.
Ah, okay.
This colony isn't doing anything yet, but it's got no one alive, so it won't bother scanning until someone's alive. So I'm not sure what it's up to, but it does. There it goes. One thing I haven't sorted yet is a nest management process. It's a little bit more involved than that sequence bot that we saw in 3.1. So I wanted the AI to be a little bit cleverer about what it does in the nest, because at the moment it's just being told, if there are enough resources, build the next tiles. If there are enough resources, build the next tiles. And what happens is, if you give it loads of resources at the start, it will just set loads of base jobs, and the way the job manager is set up, building and digging are higher priority than moving eggs around the nest. And so there will have been a load of ants in that enemy colony just digging and building, and not taking eggs to create the the ants that they've just placed down. But they're starting going now. So there's a fight going on here. You can see an army group has been sent directly to the battle. They're still trying to harvest up here. Now, problem here is, I think I've set the scans to not go. I think the idea of these food points here was the scan was it was supposed to be able to reach this, and they would change their mind and head to these ones. But I think I've reduced the scan distance, so this colony is not actually aware of these. So this is going to be actually quite a boring battle. But when I ran it before and they were aware of these, they'd sort of flip-flop. So they decide, one of them would decide, this is no good. I'm losing the battle. It's not cost-effective. And then head up to these ones. They'd stay out of the way of each other. But at the moment, this colony and this one are unaware of these three things.
Yeah. So then, and as you said, the kind of goal for this system is that it can be used in the Firen update and then the update after that, which is 1.0, and tied back into free play.
And then hopefully if we want to make some extra levels, John's been making a lot of extra levels over the past year, to keep the game fresh whilst we work on all of these other systems. The idea of putting an AI controlled enemy colony into an extra level that's only supposed to take a couple of weeks to put together, it is no longer a scary prospect. It's something that you can just throw in, or hopefully you'll be able to just throw in.
Yeah, so it's good. Kind of the future of AI and Empires Undergrowth looks very bright, then, as opposed to kind of the hard-coded stuff from earlier on. Is there anything else after this that you wanted to show?
No, this is the end. So
the finale?
After that, basically, this is where I'm at. So when I said I'm gonna watch this video, that's basically the next thing on my list to fix. And at the moment, I think the next thing that I've got to do is make the harassment process. I called it. Just have a quick look at I don't think we actually went into it. The harvesting process is quite. You want to see some spaghetti code? This is one of the reasons I needed a large monitor, because I was trying to deal with this on a 15-inch laptop screen.
Oh wow!
So
okay.
this is the harvesting process. So it's based on what the group's already doing, and there's loads of calculations, so it can really decide whether it wants to be harvesting or not. it thinks about how many ants have been dying. You'll do that initial scan, of course, but it could be getting attacked from the side or somewhere weird. So it's also keeping an eye on how many ants died recently, and it'll be thinking about that. And it can do things that I haven't really fully tested. I've seen them turn on, but it can do things like turn off combat and run through a battle to collect some food to try and get it back because it's so desperate. It's got sort of this whole like retreating section. In 3.1, the ants retreat all the way home. These will retreat, but whilst they're retreating, they're thinking about, is it still dangerous? And what can happen is they'll start getting attacked. They'll retreat, but reinforcements will be coming, and what they'll try and do is meet in the middle and then turn around and go back. Yeah. They have a defending process, so where the harvesters have actually switched to, this isn't defending the base, this is defending their food. So they might have turned harvesting off to just kill what's there, and then they're going to carry on harvesting. And there's stuff to account for, like this is if their state is currently attacking. So there might have been an attacking process going on, but now the harvester is going to overtake it. This just sets it to idle. And there's a bunch of different behaviors here for if the group is primarily an army group. So if it's an army group, you can label groups, what you want them to do to start with, because, some ants are better at some things than others. You might want to have a load of leafcutter mages, and you wouldn't want them to be a primary harvesting group. You want them to be, free to do other things.
Yeah.
So this is like harvesting light. If there's nothing else going on, it's going to harvest, but the other ones above are the sort of the main harvesters that make all the decisions, and these guys tag along if there's extra work to do.
Okay.
Hopefully the next processes will be a lot smaller. I think harassment will be, more in the order of magnitude of this, the defense group, and the same for the attack group. And so these should come out quite fast now, because this only took like a day and then another day of testing, and it did take longer than that, because as you're testing this, you're finding problems obviously with this and with the whole thing, the whole system as a whole. But the more modules I create, the easier it's going to be, because I'll just be reusing the same stuff. So fingers crossed, the next two are going to be an absolute breeze, and then I'll be actually working on the levels.
Okay, great. Yeah, and that's quite a good in-depth look at the AI in the game. Whew, that was a long video. I hope you found that interesting. I know I did, and I had to listen to it twice. Joking aside, if you did like this video, let us know in the comments below, and I'll certainly sit down with some of the other developers to see what they've been up to. If you'd like to stay up to date with all things Slug Disco, we do have a Discord server, the link for that's in the description. But for now, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!